So there I was, in my mid to late 20s, living on the mainland with no intention to move back to Hawaii. I found a pretty good job, I had a car, and frankly, I had enough stuff. I wasn't making a lot of money back then, but it was enough to get by since rent for my studio apartment was cheap and the cost of living was so affordable. And sure, I was thousands of miles away from friends and family, but I'd built a pretty nice life for myself. But at the time, I remember asking myself, am I really gonna live on the mainland for the rest of my life? For a local kid from Hawaii, that's a scary question, and I know it's a question that many people are asking themselves right now. I've gotten some messages and emails asking me about this very topic, and so I want to make a video about it. And yes, I'm talking about moving back to Hawaii, as in you're originally from Hawaii and are considering coming back to Hawaii after some time away. So images like this, or this are probably not gonna impress you too much. So should you move back to Hawaii? Well, I can't really tell you what to do because I don't know your specific situation. However, I do want to talk story about some things to consider, particularly what's happening in Hawaii right now and what you could expect if you move back, and then share why I chose to move back to Hawaii in 2012. So if you're thinking about moving back to Hawaii after being away and aren't sure, maybe you'll find this discussion encouraging or at the very least interesting. If you're considering moving back to Hawaii, I'm assuming that you are an adult now. You know, an adult who can take care of yourself, get a job, do your own taxes. And as an adult, there are definitely some things about the economy that you should be aware of. Tourism took a really big hit this past year. The visitor numbers are down and a lot of businesses are struggling to make it. The job market is very tight because you have a lot of scared and worried people looking for whatever they can get. And it's not just local people who lost their jobs, but you're also competing against people from the mainland who lost their jobs who are considering moving to Hawaii. Next thing is be prepared for things to cost more. Of course, we're talking about food, electricity, gas, and water, and let's not forget about housing costs. And lastly, you should just know that the population of Hawaii is actually shrinking. It's been shrinking for the last several years. Now, you might think that that's a good thing. You know, more space for you on the beach and less traffic. Oh, maybe. But with a smaller population, there's a smaller tax base, which means that whoever is left in Hawaii will be paying more for the government services. And so it may not necessarily be a good thing that the population is shrinking. But since you are moving back to Hawaii, I'm assuming that you're gonna have family here. So take advantage of that. Live with mom and dad or grandma and grandpa, and trust me, that is the best deal in town. In a lot of ways, Hawaii remains the same. I mean, you know how it is, but things have been changing. You know, it's kind of like how the beaches will erode over time. I mean, you know that it's happening. The tides come in and they pull the sand away from the shore, but it's happening at such a slow pace that it's really hard to notice. A lot of things have changed during the time that I was away, and then when I got back to Hawaii, I was kind of surprised. I mean, you look at downtown, a lot of development. The demographics of Hawaii are changing, and the pace that things are changing seems to be speeding up a little bit, but it's hard to see when you're living here. It's hard to see when it's your everyday. You also probably notice that some of your family and friends have moved away to the mainland too. California, Oregon, Washington, Nevada, Texas. Yeah, they're probably there. So if you choose to come back to Hawaii, just know that it's a different place. It's still home, but it's a different kind of home. So why did I move back? Well, when I was growing up, I never even entertained the idea of living on the mainland. I just figured I would live in Hawaii my whole life. I'd get a job here, start a family, work here, and die here when it was my time. My dad was always the kind of dad who would encourage me and my brother to go to college on the mainland. And if we wanted to, he said that we could stay there after college. You know, he didn't think it was so important for us to live in Hawaii, just that we visit, you know, once or twice a year. But even with that, during my college years on the mainland, I thought I'd move back to Hawaii after graduation. And then life happened, and I went to Oregon for school, and then I dropped out after a month. And then after that, I went for more schooling in Colorado, and after graduating again, I found a job that I enjoyed. And over the years on the mainland, I actually grew to liking it. I like the mainland lifestyle, even though I grew up in Hawaii. I liked the seasons and just how there was so much more opportunity there. And it didn't bother me that in most places, I was the only like Asian guy. But there came a point in my life when I really had to ask myself if this is where I wanted to be for the rest of my life. And so I had to make a decision. And the reason this decision was so hard for me was because it felt so final. Like the finality of the decision was so real, or at least that's what it felt like at the time. You know, it's not like moving from California to Nevada or even New York to Florida, where, yeah, those are some big moves, but you're able to drive, and it's technically possible to drive back to visit friends and family. But moving to or from Hawaii is like an uprooting of your life because it's so far and there's no way to drive. So for me, the decision to move back to Hawaii came down to really three things: family, culture and food, and contentment. I reached a point in my life when I realized that my parents were getting older. And of course, people get older, but for the longest time, I guess I didn't think my parents aged at all. I think it was because I saw them every day when I was growing up that I just got used to seeing them, and they just didn't really age to me. You know, it's like they just seemed to look like they were perpetually in their mid to late 40s. But when I spent long chunks of time on the mainland away from them, and then I came back to Hawaii and saw them, I realized that they were aging much faster than I had noticed. And that realization prompted me to at least think about my parents and caring for them as they got older. And as the oldest son, I feel like it's my responsibility to watch out for them and take care of them if need be. And even with a family, I still feel that same responsibility today. And I don't know if it's like an Asian thing or if it's a Hawaii thing that we tend to have this deep sense of obligation to try to take care of our parents as they age. I mean, that might be letting them move in with us or us living with them. You know, taking them to doctor's appointments, driving them around, and doing their shopping. Family is the most important thing in Hawaii, and it's something that's very important to me because that's how I was raised. You know, we're a very close family, and it's something that I really value. And that in itself was enough for me to move back. There really is no place like Hawaii anywhere in the world, like not even close. And while I had adjusted and acclimated to the Midwest culture, parts of me missed and longed for the laid-back lifestyle of Hawaii. You know, something as simple as throwing up the shaka on the road is something that I really miss seeing. Culturally, it's not as if people on the mainland are mean. I mean, maybe some of them are, and they treat Hawaii people or really anyone who's different from them pretty poorly. But you can't really control that. You know, there are a lot of friendly people that I've had the privilege of meeting and get to know on the mainland. And their friendliness to me is basically aloha without them knowing that it's aloha. But it's just not the same culture as Hawaii. And if you lived here, you'd understand what I'm talking about. Hawaii's culture is this mix of friendliness and family and casualness and tolerance and acceptance with a little dash of stink eye to make things a little bit exciting. And a quick thing about food. Obviously, if you spend any amount of time on the mainland, you know that there's not really much comparison to the food in Hawaii. I actually enjoyed eating the mainland food, you know, the rolls, potatoes, mac and cheese. But boy, there were a lot of days where I really missed the local food. I mean, have you ever craved local food so bad that you're willing to actually drive to another state to get it? Fortunately, in Colorado, I didn't have to because there was an L&L drive-in in Denver, and anytime I wanted a plate lunch, I would drive the 1 hour south to Denver, eat the plate lunch there, and then drive another hour back home. I remember the first time that I actually did this. I got a little like teary-eyed when I walked into that L&L and I saw the tables and the menu and the canned juice, and I ordered a chicken katsu plate, and when it was ready, it was one of the best things that I had ever eaten on the mainland. I mean, there's nothing really like chicken katsu and rice on the mainland, and that's something that we take for granted here in Hawaii because it's right there. It's across the street, it's down the street, it's wherever you want. When you're on the mainland, you miss it. I'm not sure if contentment is the right word to describe this. It's not tiredness either, but basically I had seen and done enough on the mainland that I was pretty content. I hadn't done everything on the mainland, but I had done enough. I made it on my own and I saw new and interesting things. I experienced culture shock and I was able to see how other places in the US were like, and I grew up a lot as a person, so to me, I'd accomplished what I'd set out to do. Being on the mainland for me wasn't an escape from Hawaii's high cost of living or in trying to chase some bigger or better opportunity. It was just to go to college and experience what I couldn't experience in Hawaii. And after my 8 to 9 years, I had done that, and that was good. You know, I wanted to bring back all of the ideas and paradigms that I had seen and see if I could make it here in Hawaii on my own. So if you're thinking about moving back to Hawaii, I'm sure there's already a lot you are considering. The logistics of moving here alone are tough. So good luck with that decision. Thanks for watching, and aloha.